So Andrew, when we left off the last time, we were talking about food security is really about enough food for everybody, but a lot of it comes down to who is the spokesperson for that. Is it grocery stores? Is it the mayor? Is it a politician? Is it a food bank? When we talk about food security, when the public looks to that to talk about it, I'm not sure they know who to go to, right? What they often think of are more charitable impulses, things like what a food bank would do, or some of the groups that are helping the homeless, or whatever. But it needs to be more than that. The public needs to be able to have a group. I think that they know that when they come to it, there's research here, right? There's participation, collaboration with all these different groups. And it seems to me, I'm saying it, you didn't ask me to say it, but I really think that the Food Policy Council should be that group. That was the design of it a number of years ago when all that effort went into it. But let's say that was to happen. Let's say that all of us realize that this is what the food policy needs to be, the Food Policy Council needs to be. How do we promote it? How do we help it? We're not just talking about funding here, there'll be other things as well. But I know you've done a lot more thinking about this than I have, Andrew. But how do you see that going forward? Who should fund it? Who should maybe come alongside of it and help it with other things like research and other things? What do you think there? What's your view?
Oh, this is such a big part of it's taking up a lot of real estate in my head these days. Is that question: whose responsibility, whose job is it to fund some of the steps, especially where we are now, which are a lot of them are initial steps
Yeah.
to get this moving forward. We are so when you look at other communities across, my expertise is in North America. San Diego's got a really good food systems alliance where they're trying to create a collective to come together to create a food secure community and a sustainable food system for that community's future. There's a great one out of Halifax. There are happening, and it's really interesting because when you look at Halifax's, their second phase of the action plan they're trying to create is establishing a food policy council. When you look at some of those roadmaps that you see in other communities that are working on these issues, we are in many ways further ahead than other communities. And I think that's because of we have an incredibly progressive and deeply rooted food bank. We've got we are surrounded by agricultural land. It's such a big driver of our local economy, and it makes the makeup of our community. I think London and Middlesex has an opportunity to stand up and recognize we have an opportunity to be leaders in this area because we are ahead. And so I also agree that the Food Policy Council is where I would like to see that. See who I would like to see leading that charge, and but the work that needs to be done in terms of public engagement and helping people understand what this plan is, where it came from, why it's so well thought through and evidence-based, how to access that information. Like you said, that's going to take resources, and where do they come from? So where my head is at, and this is my opinion, is we almost need to do an exercise collectively as a community and go, well, who stands to gain from moving towards a food secure community? And food impacts so many different aspects of our lives, and achieving that goal is going to have massive health outcomes in our community as we start to see people, when you increase food literacy at a community level, when you improve food security at a community level, health improves. We know that through evidence, and we know that the opposite is true. The more food insecure a community is, the lower food literacy, you end up with more costly health outcomes.
Yeah.
So being cognizant of the fact that our health care system is not in a place where it has money to throw around, but they do stand to gain a lot. So is there an opportunity to take a fragment of funding from, whether it's healthcare foundations, whether it's, from collectives, as opposed to through a ministry funding? I would love to explore that. There are massive benefits of our local food production infrastructure. If we can, as some of the recommendations talk about, have conversations with our larger institutions, our hospitals, our universities, our colleges, long-term care homes, any of those public institutions that order a lot of food, that have a lot of food that move through their day-to-day operations. If we can convince them to start being focused on where that food that is going through their daily operations is coming from, and being able to wrap their heads around being strategic in how they select that food, and potentially making the food that's flowing through healthier, making sure a certain percentage of it is locally produced or sustainably produced, or there's lots of different ways you can talk about it. But if there were commitments and shifts that would happen, you would see massive economic impacts happen locally in terms of job creation, in terms of and that's well documented and evidence-based as well. So is there input from those institutions in terms of supporting this work moving forward, knowing that there is economic benefits to gain coming out of it? I think that's where I keep going to. There's environmental outcomes that are beneficial. You're going to see political outcomes for our local politicians. Can we get that list of people who are going to benefit, or those larger players that are going to benefit, and go, if everybody throws in a little, and this is the bonus of the Food Policy Council as well. We're not looking to create a number of full-time jobs. We're not looking to create a big not-for-profit with a bunch of overhead. This can be done relatively cost-effectively because the Food Policy Council is made up of working professionals. But there needs to be a capacity and intention behind how that messaging is out there, in making sure that the work that needs to be done can be done. If they are going to host those conversations and forward this very clear, I think it's 15 action steps, they need the resources to be able to do that, to ensure that it's done in a way that the public can follow along, that people can provide input where they need to, that people can provide counter perspectives when and where that's needed and important. And that does take some resources, but it doesn't need to be a lot. And I feel like if we could figure out a way to have everybody put a little bit of capital in the center, we would see it go a long way, and likely see it go further than if any one organization or institution forward it. And it needs to, you mentioned at the beginning, it needs to incorporate a political lens, but it needs to be bigger than relying on politicians or any one level of government to be solely responsible of funding it, because that's not sustainable as well. Different governments have different priorities, and that's not a bad thing. We just need to be setting this up in a way that it can transcend any of those challenges or changes, I suppose.
So let me get a little bit controversial, not you, but me.
Okay.
You just mentioned Halifax, and to affirm what you said, the mayor of Halifax is a great friend of Jane and mine. We were MPs together, Mike Savage. We were MPs together. He's also the chair of the Big City Mayor's Caucus, right? Yes. So and his dad used to be premier of the province down there. So, he's really connected. But he and I were talking just a couple of weeks ago, and, his view is, boy, I wish we had what London had. I wish we had a food assessment about that. They have some stuff around fishing, but not around a lot of this other stuff. And he wished that they had a Food Policy Council. What you're saying is they're just getting started with one, and I understand that. But he would love to give what we have some political vision. Now, I'm just saying that it is my sense that politically in London, there is not that vision. There are individual councillors, there's the mayor, there are others who have things and causes that they really believe in and that they further and they really support, and they do invaluable work. But the idea of embracing something like food security the way that you see political leadership embracing dealing something with homelessness right now. It seems to me that that is not there. And before you answer, I just want to say that I think that that is unfortunate, because I do think the community, with some support from the city, people like Jay Stanford at the city, John Fleming when he used to be there, also funding. It was them that I think gave the $100,000 to update the food assessment. So they're there in that area. But the idea of them then turning around and saying, let's turn London into a food city, a garden city, or have it work within the region that way, it is my sense that we don't have that kind of vision. And therefore, those of us who are community partners have to help those who are in politics, because they are doing a lot of work out there in different things, as I said. But to embrace this vision, they would need all of us to be able to come together and say, this is what we want. Do you agree with me or disagree with me there? Understanding you have to be a little bit careful, maybe. But
No. I to be honest, I very much agree with you in everything you said. I would just add to it that what I wouldn't agree with, that you didn't say, is that it needs to start with that political buy-in. I think the political buy-in is a part of the process. It's going to take time. And I think one of the things I would advocate for is taking the 15 recommendations that have come out of this assessment and looking at a bunch of the content that's within each of the different reports and going, how does this align with the city's strategic plan? And how do we work towards creating those relationships, getting that buy-in from from city staff and from our councillors and the mayor, and working towards not just how does the food assessment update align with the strategic plan, but next time the city is producing a strategic plan, how do we embed it more clearly right into the strategic plan? That takes time and energy. And to your story about, forgive me because I'm not going to remember his name, but the mayor of Halifax,
Mike Savage.
It's great to have a political figure that's passionate about your issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different thing to embed that issue into any and every government's priority. I think, and there's two ways that can be done. There's dealing with an issue in a reactionary way, and there's dealing with an issue in a strategic way. It is possible to get buy-in from any level of government on an issue where they want to prevent a certain type of action. They want to ensure that, in this case, that people are food secure. So it doesn't matter who's sitting in the mayor's seat and who's sitting in the councillor's seat. They know that they're bought into that vision. That's our goal. They may share different opinions on the best way to work towards that goal, and that's how our system works. What the Food Policy Council's role would then be was to make sure that the politicians have an understanding of how their vision for how to get from A to B works with and or potentially against the evidence that all of the outcomes are based from. And that's kind of the goal, is how do we work towards getting this ingrained in the fabric of the community? Because what we don't want is, unfortunately, we're seeing with a massive issue around homelessness in our community. And everybody knows that's now embedded in the fabric of any political figure that walks in at any level of government, knows this needs to be addressed. But that's because it got to a point where it is so front and center in everybody's face that you can't look past it anymore. Everybody knows that it has to be a priority because you just can't skirt around it. If we could have gone back in time 20, 30 years and approached this issue strategically with a preventative mind, maybe we wouldn't be sitting in the place that we're at right now. Maybe we would have gone into the pandemic not just having yourself and some other people in the community go, this pandemic has the potential to go. I remember talking with you in early 2020 and going like, if we don't play our cards a specific way right now, we're going to see 3, 4, 5, 6 times the demand
Yeah.
on food banks in
Yeah.
2023, 24 that we do now. And it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that that's exactly what we're seeing right now, because
Yeah.
we didn't have those plans and strategies in place. We have an opportunity with this right now where we just saw our food system survive and react to be honest, a lot better than people, in many ways, than people were expecting, to a global pandemic. That does not mean that there isn't a million things about our food system that we should
Yeah.
be paying attention to and improving as we hopefully avoid a future catastrophe. And I think we have the opportunity with this report and with the Food Policy Council to go, let's strategically work towards a food secure community and make sure that we're not ending up in a reactionary state later on where food insecurity has grown to a level where it's not even clear where to start addressing it. And I think that this report does some of that really well, and that needs to be one of the first steps. And I see the recommendations that have come out of this report as falling into 3 main categories. And I hope you're okay if I kind of dive into it very quickly. But to me, this is how I see it. And I just want to be clear that I'm not representing the entire Food Policy Council when I'm saying this. This is my opinion. I see an overarching theme of inclusiveness and a need to listen to marginalized communities, to our Indigenous communities, in all of the actions that we take. And that's why that's the number one recommendation that came out of this report. Then the other 14 recommendations fall into 3 categories. You've got policy change and advocacy for what needs to be done, which I think very much what you were speaking to in terms of building alliances and helping our political leaders understand how food security and what we're dealing with in the issues surrounding homelessness and poverty, how they are intertwined, and in many ways one and the same issue, or at least 2 issues that are totally woven together, and can't be really addressed without one or the other. So that's some of the recommendations fall into that, advocacy and policy change. Some of them are definite action items and things that need to be done and need to be moved forward logistically. And those are big items, they're small items, and lots in between. And then many of them surround funding and go back to that question where we say who is going to gain from all of this and who should be throwing a little bit of capital in the ring so that all of this can move forward. And we need to be looking at those both in an immediate lens and in a long-term lens. And I think you and I have been talking about this for 15 years. Together, I know you have been talking about this for much longer with the food bank. But you need to both address immediate needs while also working on preventative measures. And that has to happen at the same time, or else, you're never going to get people on board with supporting preventative measures if you're not addressing immediate needs. And if you only address immediate needs and don't invest in those preventative measures, you can never get rid of those immediate needs, and they're just going to continue to grow and take up all your capacity. And it's not a small task. It's not simple, and it's complicated. And I think that's why this report gives us the means to be able to create a roadmap and a plan moving forward. And that needs to be a priority for us at the community level while we're working on the volume of immediate needs that we're seeing here in the community. Have to be, and this report is so well rooted in the research and the evidence that was done. It is, nothing's going to be perfect, but it gives us a very clear picture of how to move things forward. And I think we owe it to ourselves as a community to figure out how to invest in that and give it a chance to move forward.
Yeah, I think for me, in the last 10 minutes that we have, I think for me, there is this thing about that we have to be able to practically put this in motion. And to me, that would involve, what we're seeing with the assessment, everything is telling us. If we want to turn ourselves into a food city, it really will involve council and others to turn it into public policy. But who would you get to do that? Let's say all of a sudden the city had hearings about an input about what would it take for us to do that. Well, which group would you go to? Well, it's true that you could go to a number of different groups and hear their point of view, but it's also true that those groups could have already done their work, right, and had worked through the Food Policy Council. And so it's the Food Policy Council that would come and make that presentation. But behind it is the food bank, the chamber, Western Fair, all of the others to say, hey, look, we're not just coming along and throwing support because it's a good idea or it's fashionable this week. We've done our work with the Food Policy Council, get that. And as they go forward, we support them in that effort. It seems to me that, and I know this from the political side, they often wait to see not who the speaker is, but who's behind the speaker. And I think that is so important. And if they're looking at it and they're seeing all of these Western, Fanshawe, Kings, now all the others, right? Post-secondary places like the Chamber, business cares, all of those things, they're backing that. It's very hard for them to kind of skate away from that, or to even manipulate it, because these people have come and put it all together. It seems to me, for me, I'm just saying, I know you would probably work different, but that's how I would like to see the Food Policy Council take that leadership. That it's not all these different groups all saying different things. We did that. We did that behind the scenes and we produced these reports. Now we're here to say, here's what we believe needs to be done. And we're all here to support the Food Policy Council doing it. We have 5 minutes left here, Andrew, but that's where I see the Food Policy Council really carrying the water on this one and making it work. I think they're capable of it. What I'm not sure of yet is if the others are willing to stand behind them to the degree that they need to. We need to work on that. Is that a vision that you see for yourself, or do you see the Food Policy Council kind of going another way?
No, that's. I think you painted a really accurate picture of how I feel and how I think I would feel comfortable saying that is the hope of the council as a whole. And again, I have to be really careful saying that because I aim to speak on behalf. But I think that's how it works in a perfect world. That's where the Food Policy Council, advocates on behalf of. Really, the Food Policy Council belongs to the community and it belongs to the stakeholders that it's made up from. That's why anyone in the community, anyone who's involved in our food system, and really that's all of us, but especially professionally and personally, can apply to be a part of the Food Policy Council. There's a reason there's terms and that we're bringing new people in all the time, because you want the council to represent the community. And I think that when it's working properly, the council advocates on behalf of everybody, especially politically, especially for those types of change. They communicate to the public on behalf of their stakeholders, hopefully clearly, but they also know when to step back and go, you're now asking, and I say it could be political, it could be public, it could be anyone, to say, now you're asking something specific. This would actually be the best place for the food bank to speak on this issue, or this would be the best place for the chef who is in charge of procuring all of the food for everything that is food service for Western University to speak. This is the person who controls the buying power of our hospital system. Here's someone to speak on behalf of manufacturers. And I think that's the Food Policy Council is very conscious of not overstepping and speaking out of turn, and is trying, I think so far, is painting a picture of where it is their place to speak and where to represent everybody. And then when it is to say, we actually recommend this to be the best person or organization to speak on this particular issue. And the food system is so complex and big. I would say there isn't a single person, especially myself included, around that table that would know who the best person to speak in any given situation is. And that's the power of a council like that. When you have 12 or 15 people around the table, everybody doesn't agree a lot of the time. And to be able to take all of those individuals from all of their backgrounds, representing all of their interests and backgrounds and knowledge, and be able to go, here's what we think as a council. There's a lot of power to that. And again, back to last episode where we started with, that was the power of a collective that got food literacy embedded into a provincial school curriculum. Was eventually, it was only 3 people representing 150 some organizations that brought forward a report to the Ministry of Education. But when they opened that report, they knew that there was input from those 150 organizations across the province. That made them, it validated the report in a way that any one interest group can't. And it gave them the means to be able to literally pull from it and put it into curriculum. And I think that it's one of many examples of how the work of a collective like the Food Policy Council can create that change. And I think that's absolutely the way it needs to move forward. And so far in my time on the council, I have seen them do a very good job in being conscious about when they speak for their membership and where they speak to and for the community. And that becomes the community's role in all of this, is making sure they're engaged and making sure that if they feel like the council is moving away from the best interest or not representing the best interests of the community, that they have a place where they can communicate that, where it's heard, and where the council can adjust if needed.
Yeah. Andrew, thank you for this. I think we as a food bank, I'm in my 38th year there as a food bank, and I keep telling people that the answer to food insecurity is not more gifts to charity. It's food security. There's business in it. There's money to be made. There's prosperity. There's community buy-in. There's all of those different things. And I think we as a food bank and our board as well, because we've talked about this lots, I think our way of going forward on this has really been in the last few years to support the Food Policy Council. Because without that voice, like who do people go to figure out what that is? There's just so many different groups. But you've been able to coalesce and bring a bunch of those groups together to get around some of these policies and papers and other things that you've done. I think it's really important that the Food Policy Council begins to emerge from all of that and be seen as that champion. I realize it will have a number of voices within itself, but as an organization, it's really important. And I guess it's just my sense, and I felt that after the Saturday. I feel we're getting really close to that. So I really thank you for the leadership you've shown in that, and to the community. So it's not just about, growing chefs. You're really putting a lot of that package together along with many other committed people. So thank you for that, Andrew. Thanks for all you've done. We'll do some more shows on the Food Policy Council because we want to give it that profile. But I think you've given us a real grounding today. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having these conversations. And I think the last thing I just want to say before we close is just to remember everybody listening is our food system and where we're at with all of this. There's a lot of work to be done, and there's not going to be clear answers all the way through. And in fact, as we look at change on a large level, there are going to be conflicts and contradictions that happen all along the way. And just to be open to learning together as a community, to be open to listening, to be open to providing feedback, and most importantly, to be open to compromise. Because if we only move forward looking for our favorite things and our specific needs to be met, we're going to end up not seeing anything move forward at all. So, and my hope is our connection with food and all of our individual reliances on it and connections with it are going to help to show how we can move forward in this way and use beyond the food system to build better communities for all of us.
Yeah, agreed. Look forward to talking to you more. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Glenn.